Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet. This is Andy Revkin in Maine, in a very cold part of the world. And I'm running a Sustain What, my webcast on complicated issues, trying to get clarity through conversation. I'm really excited to have two journalists from Global Press Journal, globalpressjournal.com, which is an international network with female reporters, and mostly the editors are women as well around the world, trying to bring to trying to bring to light some really important issues that the mainstream press, which I worked for a long time, tend to miss, and to do it on the ground in places that where the world's struggling the most. Today, we're going to talk about the USA Agency for International Development and what's unfolding under the assault. They use the words themselves, the assault of the administration on this agency, which was set up with presidential leadership, John F. Kennedy, but then Congress made it a congressional mandate, and it's being paralyzed and to a certain extent dismantled by under the early weeks of the Trump administration. And most of the coverage you see so far has been about tussles, or hypocrisy. Here, Carlo Rubio, now the Secretary of State, just a few years ago, he was tweeting himself, "I am at the USAID facility in Cucuta, Colombia. We have over 300 metric tons of food and medicine ready." So that was him describing the impact of Maduro crime family issues as pure evil, and now he's dismantling this agency, at least to a certain extent at the moment. And that's kind of the story. But what the story really is, the real story is, how's this playing out in places like Uganda? And that's why it's great to have Nakisanze Segawa here. She's a reporter in residence in Kampala for Global Press Journal, more than a decade of experience and award-winning coverage of global health and human rights issues there. And Krista Karch, who is the editor-in-chief of Global Press Journal, leading, a global interconnected network of journalism covering civil liberties, global health, and the environment. And we're going to talk through a little bit about what your coverage is like so far, and what the challenges are. The journal has been doing a running special series so far from Nepal to Zimbabwe, and everywhere in between on this. So thank you first of all, for taking the time to come on this webcast. And let's just dive right in and explore things. Maybe we'll start with Krista, just to remind folks what Global Press is, and when you see the news unfolding as we see it now, how does your network conceive of the story? Again, most of what we see here in the States is focused on the Beltway, on DC. So how does this work for Global Press? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Apologies. We've been doing this for so long.
Oh, I know.
But thank you so much for your time. I have the honor of working with some of the best journalists in the world, because they are local journalists and they cover issues, locally. We have people like Nachi in Uganda. We've got people in Zimbabwe. We've got people in rural Argentina, Nepal, Nigeria, so many other places. And I think the one thing that's really important to remember about Global Press is that we are a completely independent news organization. Unlike so many others, particularly nonprofits right now that have gotten money directly through USAID or somewhere else, we've never taken any government money. So that's a really important piece. We're not a political organization. We're not politically aligned. And so that really informs our coverage. And our news really is the closest lens that you can find to what's going on in these places. Our reporters speak local languages. They understand local cultures. And like Nachi, they live there. They're not going anywhere. So all of our stories are published on our website. The other really important thing about Global Press is that our stories are published with local partners on the ground, often in local languages when needed. And so when we think about something like this USAID crisis, keep all of that in mind. Again, as we say, Andy, so much of this is beltway focused coverage. And what we do really is to talk to people on the ground and to get a sense of what the true story really is. We've got a lot of examples of doing this in the past, but this is really kind of ground zero for us because we cover so many of these issues and have for such a long time in local languages by local people.
That's so great. And let's go to Kampala and to Nakisanze. I hear some kids.
Yes, they are that get their my neighbors kids. And I'm afraid to go and tell them, please keep that voice low.
I know.
Just,
same in my house.
Okay.
So just explain a little bit about where you are, how you became a journalist first, and then we'll dive into the story.
I live in Uganda. I live in Uganda, Kampala, but hope very soon I'll be leaving Kampala and going deep in the village. Regarding the situation, I'm looking at the effects that I've been able to witness in the communities where I've been able to report. Oh, sorry, I have been working as a journalist for close to 10 years and with Global Press for 9 years.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Global Press, I've done previous webcasts with Global Press, and one of the most impressive things about the organization is how the journalists are trained. It's very distinct from how we do it in the North, in the United States. You have a wonderful way of being careful about using words, so that they're not being misinterpreted. The style guide is great. What right now are you looking at, Nakisanze? What's your story? You said you're heading to a village somewhere, or what's your focus right now as a journalist, as a reporter?
I focus on civil liberties, but also do other stories. But previously, I've been writing a lot on health, which I still continue to do, and human rights. I've done a lot of reporting on LGBTQI community. I think I've been the most vocal advocate of LGBTQI people in my country, and that's because I'm writing for a media organization that invites every human being's experience. Like in most of the local media organizations in my country, voices of LGBTQI people would never be given a platform to share their experiences. But with Global Press, this is an opportunity I get to amplify their voices, to share their experiences with the rest of the world. So something that I continue to do.
Yeah, and you just did a story. You just filed a story about HIV work there and how it can be impacted as health clinics are closing, and that's to a certain extent related to the USAID funding. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Oh, that was not my story.
Oh, it's not yours. Okay. Oh, I see.
That was by a colleague.
Okay. So generally, though, how do you all work on? How do you get out there, and what do you see as the issues right now? Thinking specifically about the Agency for International Development paralysis. What are the most important
about HIV? Hello.
Yeah, just how it's playing out generally for health and for the other issues.
There's a lot of fear in my community because of the things that have happened. The government recently closed all its public clinics, all its HIV clinics, and they were integrated into the outpatient department. And there's been an outcry in the public of why this is happening. And people know why it's happening, but they are worried of access to their antiretrovirals, access to their TB drugs, and also access to HIV preventive drugs, such as Kabla and other antiretrovirus that are given to people such as sex workers to prevent them, or people at risk of HIV. People have been exposed to HIV, such as people who have been raped. But all these access to the clinics. The clinics are gone, at least the public clinics, but also because civil society has been playing a very important role in providing such drugs to the community. And most of these civil societies are being funded by USAID. Many of them have had to close, and many of them have had to refer their clients to government hospitals or government clinics. But even these government clinics have been closed. And what has been happening is that many health workers have lost their jobs too. Recently, I spoke to a young medical doctor, who was telling me that government and big private hospitals were not able to take in all graduates in the health sector. And the civil society was really playing a very, very big role in employing these health graduates, doctors, nurses, and they were providing medical services to patients. But now most of civil societies and the clinics that they were managing are closed. So the health workers have also lost their jobs. But most importantly is that the communities that have been able to access these services are not able to, and some of them have been forced to move to far distances to be able to access these drugs, and it's being very challenging to them, and some are opting out or traveling all these long distances to be able to access the drugs. Yet the civil society was bringing these drugs closer to the community. So it's a bit chaotic now. We just hope that in the next perhaps 2 months, 3 months, the funds will be the frozen funds will be released, and then people will be able to access the drugs and the services, the professional services that they are currently not able to attend to access.
And I'm looking now at the story you did about refugees in Uganda. In the United States, it's hard to get a detailed understanding of the dynamics in countries in that part of Africa. People may forget that Uganda there's stresses with people moving and being dislocated. How is that playing out? Why is the USAID paralysis affecting the prospects for refugees?
According to the people that I was able to speak to, the refugees, USAID has been playing a very vital part in their lives. Again, it goes back to civil society, because most of the services that were being provided to the refugees that I was able to speak to, they were direct from the NGO organizations that were providing these services, such as food, education, training in different fields, and also they would provide them with some cash grants to start their small businesses so that they are able to sustain their families. But all this is gone, and they are worried how they are going to be able to keep up with their lives, to take care of their families with all these services gone. Because as refugees in Uganda, they are not supposed to. It's hard for them to get employment for different factors. It could be the language barrier. Most of them don't speak, especially the ones from the DRC. They don't speak English. They speak French and their native languages, and therefore integrating in the Ugandan community to be able to access the jobs, but also the permits to work. It's something very limited. So they were relying on the food, the education, all the services that the local NGOs that were accessing funds from USAID. They're able to benefit from that money, but now all that money is gone. There's a lot of confusion and fear of how they are going to continue living.
Yeah. And in the meantime, there's Ebola.
Yeah.
Which you also have been reporting on. So it's the impacts seem to be across a lot of sectors. I did notice that there was a tweet I had referred to a minute ago by a Ugandan journalist, Daniel Lutaya, who was laying out the financial realities. This project, that there's a lot of jobs, a lot of the sort of infrastructure of Uganda's health ministry and other agencies relies on U.S. funding. U.S. Mission Uganda is the largest single donor of humanitarian assistance in Uganda, supporting emergency food and nutrition assistance, medical care, water, prevention of and response to gender-based violence. It's kind of, it feels like an enormous impact, particularly for this country. But let's broaden out to the other reporting efforts that are underway too. Krista, over to you for what's the word going out? How much of your reporting across the network comes from the reporters to you, or how much do you sort of put out, priorities, or say, let's do, focused coverage on this, that kind of thing?
Well, I think with this situation with USAID, it was very clear to everyone. There was no need for us to put out some sort of a call to stories. Everyone immediately knew. Because it has such a huge impact economically. But, I think the big thing is that people are dying. People are dying. We cannot emphasize that anymore. And I think, I saw some estimate that was said as soon as USAID pulled out and there was no more PEPFAR funding, people began to die. Between now and when they pulled out, more than 8,000 people are estimated to have died from USAID. Sorry, I apologies for HIV and AIDS. So that's really important to remember. So it was very easy for our reporters to bring all that in. I think in the face of the Ebola crisis, as Nachi was reporting on, this is critical. Back in the latest outbreak that was in September of 2022, USAID provided $22 million to stop the spread of that outbreak. And that was limited to, I think, just 69 days before the outbreak was over. Now, without any of that money, with this outbreak happening right now, the potential for that to happen in such a small time frame is basically gone. The possibility, even in the most self-interested way, for someone who's not in Uganda, the possibility of containing the outbreak to just Uganda has been limited. So any way you slice it, this is a huge issue. And there was, like with almost all of our stories, there was no need for us to say, let's focus on this. The impact was immediate, was clear, with people beginning to die really immediately.
Is there, to amplify the reporting you're doing, has Global Press evolved any relationships with quote unquote mainstream media? The New York Times and its like have this tradition of parachuting a journalist into someplace and putting their stamp on the resulting stories. And they do really good work, like the one I just showed a minute ago. This is a brand new story. This just went up. It has 4 different reporters, from Washington and elsewhere around the world. But is there a way for sort of a collaborative approach to coverage so that your journalists who are right there, with these very good perspectives and skills, can have your reporting move out into the world more effectively?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really exciting to me to see in journalism at large is that when Global Press first started, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on trying to find local voices or local reporters to bring in the news. And so oftentimes local reporters were used as filters, and we know this. And increasingly, we see publications like the New York Times and others using those people's expertise and then giving them a byline. So we're seeing that more and more, and we're really excited about that. So I think that there's an increased acknowledgement, awareness that there's no way to get local access to the degree that you need it without a local person. So we're increasingly partnering with these organizations because they're seeing the need for that. They're understanding that more and more, which is really exciting for us.
That's great. There's a comment that came in that's kind of, I've seen this a little bit here and there over the years. They're criticizing USAID as a sort of a hegemonic American attempt to influence Africa. Here it says Africa was better before all these preachers came to loot its resources. This is sort of the critique of a USAID. Is there part of the story ultimately that will look at that too? And it's, by the way, it's not just the United States. China and Russia have their own interests and strategies in Africa and other parts of the world. So how much of the story is also stepping back and saying, well, USAID is doing great stuff, but there's also problems. Maybe Nakisanze first, and then Krista. Do you hear that in Uganda, Nakisanze? We don't want USAID here, that kind of thing.
Yes, there are mixed voices. Yeah, I've had such voices in Uganda. But the most prominent voices that are coming out of the population and the sources that have been able to talk to is that Uganda should stop and should be looking forward to not depending on foreign aid, on US aid. They are saying, the voices are saying that it's high time our leaders did something for us. It's high time that we put our leaders on. We demanded our leaders to provide us the basic services we need. And some people are saying that some voices have been able to speak to are saying the world is really, really shifting, and we don't know if this is sustainable depending on donors. And what happens if President Trump doesn't unfreeze the USAID? What will happen? Will our government let the 1.5 million Ugandans who are on HIV treatment, who are on ARVs, and that in those that are taking preventive HIV treatments, who have been exposed to the virus, what will it do then? What will happen next if we get another Ebola outbreak and we don't have WHO to help us with the kind of expertise, hope they've come on board with? What will happen without the Chinese money? So they are looking, they are saying Africa can do more with its resources, with its expertise of scientists who have participated in research of different virus outbreaks, and also the long existing virus like HIV. Right. They've participated in the research. They have the expertise. It's just that they don't have the right infrastructure and the right money invested in them to be able to serve their communities at the capacity that they can. But they say it all goes back to the leadership, and it's always depending on the donors. And they say Africa can really uplift itself on its own. So it's all about.
So that sounds like a story that, in the news flow around moments like this, you usually see a sequence of stories. There's the initial direct impact, the harms, and then there's important stories to do about the bigger context. How much has foreign aid impeded African self-sufficiency? How much of it's related to corruption? Those are important parts of the story going forward for sure. And Krista, I wanted to get more from you on. I noticed there was a piece out of Nepal too, but what do you think about that? How when you think of global press's particular vantage point, and where does your part of the story kind of end? You can't write everything.
No, we can't write everything, but to your point about the bigger picture about foreign aid, I think the first thing to remember is that USAID was, the predecessor of USAID was founded in the 60s in the shadow of the Cold War, and a big piece of that was, they said, the front line against communism, to stop the spread of communism through foreign aid, through sort of showing people how wonderful the United States is, and giving a lot of aid, and so many people's lives have been saved because of that. We can't overlook that at all. But what has happened since then to African nations? What has happened in terms of their own sort of ability to self-determine? And that's a story that we're actually working on right now, because again, through all of the reporting that we've seen, the sentiment that we've heard from local people on the ground, all the way to experts, academics, they've all said, why didn't we make this shift? Why did we have to wait for this crisis? So now all of these countries are talking about what to do to be more self-sufficient, but they're doing it in the midst of people dying. Again, I'm just going to sort of keep repeating that people started dying immediately. And so making this shift obviously is very, very challenging, and corruption is a big piece of that. But how big of a piece is that? And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, right? Did corruption come first? Well, clearly there's corruption everywhere, but how much of this is because there's so much, foreign aid? So, and we've seen an increased presence of China economically for just even things like real estate and natural resource. Some would say plundering, others would say buying. So all of those come into play, and we're looking very, very deeply into that, because the people on the ground, again, are the people who have the closest lens on this.
Yeah. And your network, again, I want to get back to the Nepal story. Krista, can you walk through this one a little bit, or just what else are reporters working on in other parts of the world for you guys?
Yeah, so I think a big piece of this, as you say, is that it's not just sort of USAID's approach to HIV and AIDS, which a lot of people focus on. It's all of these other things. Everything from refugee resettlement and sort of everything else. It's humanitarian assistance, food, emergency services, as well as health. And one of those health service stories, as you see, comes from Nepal. Infant malnutrition, child wasting is really common in Nepal, unfortunately, particularly in rural areas. So there's this program that just in a sort of a mind-boggling way, the Nepali government had money in its coffers to roll out this program to help women ensure that their babies have enough food for breastfeeding training, for breast milk storage, but also sort of just for food assistance and building of agriculture around this topic. And the government had this money in its coffers, but they were told, do not spend that money. So what are they even going to, are they going to send it back? Are you going to Venmo it back to the, it's just mind-boggling what happened. Regardless of the feelings of USAID, there is some real logic here. So this story shows just how discombobulating this is, and how these mothers in Nepal, and we've written about malnutrition in Nepal so many times. Our reporter wrote this story very, very quickly. But you see that we already had a photo, from last year, showing that we've written about this so much. So that's one piece of it. We're going to expand our coverage across Asia. We're looking at some content coming in from Bangladesh and from Philippines, some new covered areas for us about the bigger picture of what this is.
Yeah. Boy, the politics of this is going to be interesting. There's always something about these blunt moves. Again, getting back to sort of how this mostly takes place, the decision process is in Washington, very far from these locations. The more you're showing these granular, distributed direct harms to people in real time, the better. So I'm hoping people will be sharing this webcast where it's needed most, and maybe colleagues at the Times and elsewhere can also build on what you're exposing. It's really troubling, and it's great that Global Press is on the beat. I just want to go through this a little bit more. Getting back, I showed this at the beginning for anyone who's watching now. Carlo Rubio, as a senator, was a big booster of the foreign aid strategy as a way not just to counter communism, but just to exert American influence and make the world less fragile in places that matter. And so maybe we don't end up having to run in militarily or the like after the fact. And now that seems to be going backwards. What can we do to help? Global Press Journal is maybe 15 years old now. Is that right?
18.
Wow, that's so great. And you've trained a whole cadre of journalists. How many total now who are working actively?
It's in the many hundreds of people who we've trained. We've got a huge network of reporters around the world who come in sort of as needed. We've got 17 reporters who are full-time on staff.
And you're still hoping to grow this capacity. Are there parts of the world that you feel are sort of gaps? I mean, generally there are parts of the world that just don't get enough coverage.
Mhm.
What's the goal going forward?
I mean, our goal is always to cover those gaps. We just brought in a reporting fellow in El Salvador. There's been a lot of coverage, but it's really difficult to understand. So that fellow is part of our Shifting Democracies Fellowship. So we've got a handful of fellows who came in from new countries for us who are going to focus on issues of civil liberties. And as we know, authoritarianism is on the rise around the world for a variety of reasons, and we're out to explore why that is. But do it in a way that we always have, which is sort of undercovered regions and issues. We've got actually a fellow in Ukraine that has tons of news coverage, but it's all focused on the war. So what's going on in Ukraine, sort of aside from that, in the judiciary? So that's one of the areas that we're working on. And of course, so it's topical gaps in coverage, but it's also regional, right? Physical, sort of geographical gaps in coverage that we're always, hoping to increase our scope. I would say that a gap in coverage is, during Europe in general, which we don't have anyone there other than in Ukraine. We have someone, new people in, as I said, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Philippines, covering a lot of these issues, and we'll continue to expand.
That's just great. And I think what you just said stresses the value of the philosophy there. I'm going to go back to this other web page to show it again. You have the statistic. Nearly all mainstream international news coverage focuses on war, poverty, disaster, and disease. But disease, of course, is the outcome of the lack of health. And war is the outcome of the lack of peace. And there's a crew at Columbia University where I used to work studying the dynamics that make societies peaceful. And actually, they might be a good source for some of your reporters. They look at parts of the world that are sort of more peaceful than they should be, meaning the dynamics. And it's because of certain characteristics of society, Costa Rica and places like that. And I think your approach, which is systemic rather than event based,
Yes.
is really, really important. And getting journalists to dig in on that, it requires a more subtle storytelling too. It's harder to tell that story than it is to say there was just a war or just an earthquake or just a famine.
Yeah, I mean, it's about joining existing conversations, but also creating new ones. When we join existing conversations that are happening in the news media around the world, we really want to make sure that we're adding depth there. And again, the access to local voices is really critical. What the ordinary person in Uganda thinks about the long-term impact of USAID, whether aside from people's lives being saved, could Uganda have done that on its own, right? Those local voices, the preponderance of local voices saying that is really interesting, not just academics, in the US and Europe asking these questions. And we see that, which is a really great benefit of how our reporters cover the world.
Great. Well, let's go back to Uganda one more time and to Nakisanze. One of the other things I forgot to mention about the value of global press is, including the training, is the support and sort of safety. And you also help provide support that's particularly acute for women in roles as journalists who have kids or who face threats. Could you just describe a little bit from the standpoint of being a journalist in Uganda? Is there anything particularly challenging being a woman there that you find this network is helping you with?
And one of them is having that confidence, because I know someone has my back, like Global Press has my back, to go to places where many female reporters wouldn't go to go to places like Karamoja, where when I talk to my fellow female reporters who report locally, they would say, I would never go to such a place. Because it's kind of different from the rest of Uganda. It's a unique place in very many aspects of life. But knowing that I work with global press, and if anything is to go wrong, apart from that training that I was given, where my safety is really important, it's something that I should be watching out for every time I go out to the in the field to report, but also understanding that something might not go as planned, and that I work for a media organization that would have my back in case things didn't go well. That's very reassuring, and it gives me the courage to go to places that would rather be deemed dangerous for a female journalist to go to and talk to people and see what's happening and witness events, and and report about that.
Wow, that's great. Well, the one of the ironies these days is that it's harder and harder for journalists here in the United States to make a living and to have health care and to have a media enterprise at their back because they're mostly freelance. Staff journalism jobs are rare. So the model there, you're countering something that's a challenge everywhere, even in the richest countries in the world are still finding hard. It's hard for journalists to have the things you're describing. Krista, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little.
I mean, yeah, certainly things are getting more and more difficult. One big issue for female journalists is online harassment, and we've experienced that, here at Global Press to a large degree. It is absolutely devastating when that happens, and it's very scary. Someone described it as the online, digital safety, digital threat is physical threat. So people sort of, dealing with that. But what really unique about Global Press is that we have a robust duty care system that covers a variety addresses a variety of security issues, digital, legal, and physical security, and we're constantly, sort of consistently working with experts in that field and creating a lot of expertise, of our own, and that's something that a lot of journalists don't have, men or women, and women in particular need that. So it's wonderful to hear Naki. I've heard her say this before, but it's wonderful to hear her say now that she feels more confident going and doing some of this reporting because Global Press is behind her. It's particularly challenging for our reporters. Remember that, Nachi, you are Uganda, you live in Uganda, you're not going to leave Uganda, right? It's your home. So we're not pulling people out. You can't parachute in and then pull out when there's a risk and there's a threat. So we're very, very, very careful about all of this.
There is, years ago I did a webcast with folks at PEN America, which is a writing organization that had been doing online harassment training, and they have a sort of an online manual. I'm just putting the URL there on the screen. It might be interesting to connect you all with them if their training is not something you're already familiar with, because it could be useful. It's everywhere, and this is also specifically emphasizing people who are different. So it feels like it could be something that's useful. Again, it's an issue that is pretty widespread these days.
Yeah, we've worked. We partnered with so many organizations, and I believe I've partnered with them also to really work on some of these issues. But I just spoke with someone at another news organization yesterday who said, "Wow, your duty care system is really inspiring. What can we do to bring some of this onto our own news organization?" So we worked really hard to develop our own systems. Of course, not in a vacuum at all. We wanted to take everyone's expertise as well.
That's great. Well, is there any other insights or issues I want to raise? Is there anything I can help with in terms of the connectivity I offer? Nakisanze, what you said, you're heading out to do some more reporting or heading somewhere. What's next for you?
I'll continue to do more reporting, covering my community, and it's something that I enjoy doing, and I hope to do more of that. But I would also want to emphasize on the fact that I want to briefly talk about on the issue of donor dependency. We have an article coming soon about that, but I would want to focus on the voices again. Just want to repeat that many people in Uganda think that the country is ready with human resources specifically to handle challenges that come its way, both natural disasters, because USAID hasn't only been helping in health and refugees, but it has also been helping in calamities like natural disasters, like floods, famine, and everything. And people are saying in the communities that Uganda has the human expertise to do that. They just need the support, and this includes the scientists, the doctors, the scientists in different fields. It could be agriculture, it could be health, but they just don't have the resources. And it's high time that the government and those in support of the government and the population to support the human resource that a country has for the country to thrive in case this scenario, what we are facing currently, happens again, perhaps in the next 10 or 15 or 50 years. We don't know.
Right. Boy, well, the more folks can focus aid in ways that help build that self-sufficiency, the better. That does feel, I look forward to reading that story that's coming about donor dependency. And that relates to, there's still the great game in Africa, China, especially Russia. I had dealt with this in terms of food. After the Ukraine war began, Russia was playing with food availability in North Africa, and it was really clear that they're using food as a strategic tool. The United States uses food and other things as strategic tools as well. So the more reporting coming from the ground from folks like you, Nakisanze, is really the better we'll all be. This has been really a valuable little brief session on sort of the realities underneath the USAID shutdown, wherever it's at. And as the New York Times was just reporting today, again, life-saving aid remains halted worldwide despite Rubio's promise. So this is still a crisis. And as global press reporters are reporting, it's a crisis for babies and women and mothers in Nepal, and it's a crisis for refugees and people with HIV or facing an Ebola outbreak in Uganda and elsewhere. It's everywhere. Maybe we can report back in with you at some point in the coming months when some of these other stories come out. So I appreciate your time, and thanks to Global Press for doing what you do.
Thank you so much, and we love this support. We appreciate it so much. Please share our work. We're on globalpressjournal.com. We're on Blue Sky. We're on LinkedIn. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. We so appreciate this opportunity to share more, and we'll continue to cover this issue, as so many others. But this issue is absolutely critical. So thank you for giving us a chance to speak about this.
Great. And for those who are watching, you can, as soon as we're done, the link that you're watching on becomes archived and you can share it with others. Please spread the word about both the problems there and about this reporting network and how it's making a difference in revealing those problems and also solutions. This is Andy Revkin. This is a Sustain What Live episode on the USAID crisis and paths forward, and on the journalism of Global Press in the field, showing what those impacts are like. And thank you for watching, and please do share this when we're done, which is pretty much right now. Hold on a second.